Hello everyone, I'm Ben from What Culture and I'm here with a film review for Dunkirk. Now if you're not familiar with Dunkirk, then you should be. It's the mass evacuation of nearly 400...
Evacuate. There's going to be another one.
If you're not familiar with Dunkirk, you should be. It's about the mass evacuation of 400,000 Allied troops, mainly British, in the Second World War in 1940s? 1940, isn't it, Peter? Yes, 1940. And now Christopher Nolan's having a stab at it, but is it any good? Yes, it is. It's very good. So the film itself follows several groups of people around. There are several sort of protagonists that we'll get into in a minute, and I'll tell you who the famous people playing them were. But it can sometimes be a bit confusing because it flits back and forth in those periods. So some of them will take place at night and some will be at day, and sometimes they'll cut away halfway through a scene when it gets really climactic and then jump to something completely different, and then you'll have to remember where it picked up again. It didn't do anything to derail the film, and at some points it could be argued that a lot of the young male soldiers were very similar looking, just pale and wet and tired, and they had floppy black hair, and yeah, but it was fine. It didn't really affect anything at all, and it was still phenomenal. Moving on to some of these protagonists, and let's just get it out of the way immediately. Harry Styles, he's fine. He's absolutely fine. In fact, as you'll discover in our roundtable discussion that will be coming a bit later on, that'll have spoilers and stuff in, Jules didn't even know who he was for most of the film. He did a good job. He was absolutely fine, very natural, very believable. I'm amazed. As soon as I saw him come on camera, I was watching him like a hawk, and I was actually quite impressed, if I'm honest, which is, yeah. But he crosses paths with Fionn Whitehead's character, and they're just sort of a scared little group of people who are trying to escape at all costs, much like everyone else is. I think the really impressive thing that the film does is the sense of desperation and just utter horror, in terms of everyone is climbing over each other to try and escape, and there's no real authority figures there, apart from a few at the front of the queue who are telling people when to get on the boats and when not to get on the boats. There's no real order to anything. Lots of them are just sort of splintering off or trying to find their own way back. A few of them get into a beached vessel at some point that predictably doesn't end very well, but that's his little story. And then there are tons of others as well. Tom Hardy is an RAF pilot along with a couple of other people, and there's a story revolving around him that it cuts between. There's Kenneth Branagh, who plays one of the commanders at the front of the queue, trying to oversee everything, who's relaying sort of the overarching narrative in terms of orders that are coming back from the UK to Dunkirk. Then there was Mark Rylance, very, very talented Mark Rylance, who was piloting one of the... Captaining? Boating? Driving. Sailing. Yeah. We got there eventually. Sailing one of the fishing boats that came to the aid. Because if you're not familiar with the story of Dunkirk, it's actually quite an uplifting story in the end, where they save a lot more people than they were expecting to. In fact, most of them in the end, when they were aiming for originally about 30,000, about 400,000, that's not a great deal. They just expected to lose a load of people, basically. And what happened was that they got a load of civilian ships from the UK to come over in their little dinghies, in their fishing boats, in their little yachts, to come and save people. And Tom Rylance and his son and his son's friend come over, and that's one of the main arcs as well. And all of them tie in and interweave and stuff, and it can, as I said, initially be a bit confusing, but when they all start to cross paths at certain points in the films, it makes loads of sense. And there's, I don't know, it's tough to put it into words because it is a very harrowing film, but it's also very powerful. There isn't a weak performance in there. In terms of supporting actors, there's loads of other famous faces that you'll see who technically are supporting actors, but I think a huge amount of credit has to go to the tons of extras. I'm not sure how much CGI created the troops on the beach, but there were certainly loads of extras in scenes that didn't have lines, some who did, that were extremely convincing. There wasn't a single person in that film who made me think at any point, oh, that's just a man playing, which is, I think, a lot of people were worried about Harry Styles, but fortunately he was okay and it was fine. Moving on to the presentation now, and this is really where Christopher Nolan comes into his own. Every scene was just, it was a masterpiece, wasn't it? It was incredible. The way everything was shot, the claustrophobia of the insides of the ships when they were being damaged and shot down, and if you thought the stuff in Titanic was bad when people were drowning or struggling to breathe underwater as this takes it to a whole nother level. Not only are the, as Peter will say in our roundtable discussion, not only will you have the normal camera here as the water fills up, you'll have the camera fixed to the ship, so as the ship capsizes, the water will be coming from this angle and all sorts of other horrible places, and it really is made better by the fantastic cast and how just desperate and scared they are just to get off, just to get away. Exactly, sardines in a can, as they're all being shot and picked off by the Germans, and it's genuinely horrible. And that's backed up by an incredible soundtrack that throughout, if you've seen the trailer that goes tick, 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 that's through most of the film. And it's there subtly, but it really ramps up. Every time something big is going to happen, the music just ramps up and up and up, and the ticking gets louder and louder, and you're just sat there waiting for something horrible to happen. And usually something horrible happens, but sometimes it'll just cut away to something completely different, and it's exhausting, this film. In the best possible way, it's absolutely exhausting. So the sound design is incredible, but the sound mixing's a bit wonky. I don't know if this is a problem that's just systemic to Christopher Nolan, but as with The Dark Knight Rises, when people first heard Bane speak, they couldn't really hear what he was saying. Similar problems here.
Is it just Tom Hardy?
It could just be Tom Hardy. No, the thing is, we could sort of understand what Tom Hardy was saying, but there were a lot of points where people were whispering stuff to each other or saying things, and because of the sounds of war, which were obviously very important, and they were very loud, you couldn't really hear what they were saying. You got the gist, but sometimes it was a bit, you couldn't quite hear the specifics of what they were saying. It was Churchill stuff, basically, wasn't it?
It's a toss-up between, I'm going to go off a whole sentence off camera here. It's a toss-up between whether you want to be emulating the actual fact of not being able to hear each other while there's a war going on, but I also kind of want to be able to hear what's being said in my movie.
Yes.
You understand?
Yeah, well, that man said.
Yeah.
Ultimately, it doesn't really take away from anything, though. As I said, the film is beautifully shot, and it really just, the intense war scenes are just so horrible, so harrowing, so claustrophobic. I went in there with a bag of popcorn and I ate 2 pieces. The old lady next to me cried at some point. It's a very powerful film, incredibly powerful. So there we go. Do you want to see films that make you genuinely uncomfortable for 105 minutes? Now you can. Dunkirk is out. It's by Christopher Nolan. It's very good. Harry Styles is okay. We do have a review score with it, which I will get to in a second, but please let us know what you think of this film if you've seen it already or if you're planning on seeing it, and make sure that you go and check out our roundtable discussion, which will be up in the next couple of days or so. It has spoiler discussion in it, about halfway through, but if you want to hear a more in-depth discussion, then you can go and find that. We are giving Dunkirk, however, 4.5 stars. It is undoubtedly one of the best films of the year. It's really exhausting and horrible. Go and watch it. I've been Ben from What Culture, and thanks for watching.